So here's a scary thought for you. Future generations of gamers may not care about the NES as much as we do. Question is, who's gonna stop caring first, and who do I need to punch in the face to stop this from happening? And right away, some of you might be thinking, people will never forget about the NES. It's just way too important of a part of video gaming's history. Not to mention, the ghost of fellow viewer of the channel NES Addict will be haunting gamers for centuries to come to make sure that they never forget about the NES. But here's the thing, Atari is generally considered a pretty important part of video gaming's history, and fair or unfair, a lot of people already do not give a crap about Atari, and if we're being honest, haven't cared for a while. So if it's a question of age, then the NES would be due up pretty soon for people not caring about it. But I don't think that it is just about age. I think the biggest thing that the NES has going for it is that a lot of Nintendo's most popular series had popular games on the NES, and perhaps even the first game in the series, and so naturally younger gamers just get curious and want to check it out, which I am totally in favor of. The thing is, a lot of times when people like us start talking about older games, they can give off some serious get off my lawn vibes, but in this case, no, we actually want these younger gamers to check out these games. So instead, I'll definitely be wearing my get on my lawn hat for this video. Now, when it comes to younger gamers caring about older things, the biggest thing we have in our favor is the people raising these kids, which is gonna be us. And we're gonna be the first people to hammer into their brains these older games are awesome, whether they like it or not, just like their vegetables. They gotta have them. If you push too hard, could this lead to resentment? In some cases, absolutely, but for the most part, it's a nice, gentle push to get them to try some of these games out, and frankly, just even be aware of them. If it weren't for us, they may just be completely oblivious to these games even existing. Plus, as a company, Nintendo has certainly been doing their job to keep awareness of the NES alive and well. Ever since the Wii came out, they have been releasing NES games left and right on whatever they can. They even made a dedicated mini console, and in fact, this NES mini console is the most mainstream excitement I've seen for the NES since it was brand new, and honestly, it was pretty cool to see that. I know a lot of us have always had tons of passion for the NES, but to see random people at Target getting excited for it, that was pretty cool. In fact, I distinctly remember one time when they had a big restock of it where you could actually just walk in the middle of a day and find it on the shelves. I remember this little kid going, "Oh my god, the NES Classic, they have it," and he goes running down the aisle towards the NES Classic. I stopped dead in my tracks and just looked at the parents with a look that said, "You are just doing an amazing job as parents," as tears streamed down my eyes. Now, they didn't look as comfortable with the moment as I did, but either way, it was just a great moment for me. Okay, but here's where the conversation gets really interesting, and the first part of it is this. For the most part, people consider NES games to still be playable. They're not so abstract like some of the stuff that predates it, in particular Atari, where it just looks like a bunch of dots and lines. People are looking at it like, what's even going on here? I can't even follow what's happening. Whereas with the NES, sure, it's still a little bit abstract, but it's at least detailed enough to give you enough of a sense of what's happening, what you're doing, what's on screen. Sure, in some cases it might be like, am I swinging a sword or a hot dog? I don't really know, but I can swing it like a weapon, and that works for me. And with the way that the indie scene has really been taking advantage of using that 8-bit style for some of their games, sure, they just do it because it's probably easier for them rather than some of the more expensive techniques, but either way, they use it a lot, and it's getting more and more popularized so that the visual style of an NES game is just being cemented as an acceptable way for a video game to look. So visually, it's not as hard as you might think to get people on board with how NES games look, but where you will find more difficulty is with difficulty. People do not like how hard NES games are. This even goes for people who grew up with them, let alone younger kids nowadays who just aren't used to getting their butts kicked that badly. And this is where I would say that these younger kids almost need to be trained by us who are more used to these games how to play them, because they're so used to newer modern games that are like, oh, you suck at this game? Not a problem, I got your back. Whereas older games say, oh, you suck? Well, I'm gonna make sure you know just how bad you suck. Hey, there's an idea. Maybe some of us should start offering how to play retro games seminars or something, or have some kind of conference where a bunch of kids show up and you teach them how to play Mike Tyson's Punch-Out or something, and in order to graduate the day, they gotta like beat Glass Joe and then give them like a badge or a piece of candy or something so that they feel like they actually accomplished something. The other potential problem, though, for getting younger people to care about NES games is I talked before about how Nintendo had been re-releasing NES games on all sorts of things. Well, there is a point of oversaturation, and I know that they release them because it's the easiest thing for them to release, but it kind of comes across that way where it's not as special. It's just like, yeah, this is the easiest thing to do, and it makes it lose a bit of its luster. I almost think after they released the NES Classic, they should have just kept it there and maybe keep making the NES Classic, but don't release it on everything else. But who am I to guess? It can be hard to say what exactly the right balance is for this, because on one hand, you want to make these games available, but on the other hand, if you release them too often, it kind of makes them feel less special. Okay, so the hope is that we're able to pass our love for the NES on to our kids, they can pass it on to their kids, so on and so forth. All the while, Nintendo is still, however often, releasing NES games so that they still seem important. But really, I think the biggest thing that's going to help keep the NES relevant for a long time is people wanting to play the games. And forget being just simply playable, they need to be good, and in some cases, really good. Well, luckily, some NES games are still considered excellent. There are a lot of people out there that, to this day, still consider Super Mario Bros. 3 to be the best platformer ever made. And as long as it can at least remain in the top 10 or even just top 20 for years and years to come, people are always going to want to go back and try that game out. Now, as far as people playing some of the more obscure games on the console, like Adventures of Lolo, that may just be reserved for hooligans like me and you. But either way, the NES remaining relevant for at least some reason as opposed to just fading into obscurity completely is definitely a better option. But that about does it for my thoughts. Of course, I want to hear from all of you in terms of what you think the NES's chances are for remaining relevant for a long time and what you think that is going to look like. So leave those comments down below and I will see ya in the next video.
He's the retro bird, yeah, and he's talking about me.